Okay, good morning, everybody. Since it's 10 a.m., I'm going to open our hearings, but we'll be recessing in a moment. Let me put everybody in the picture. Uh, Representative Ladd is testifying on another bill, and that bill was due to come up at 9:45. It hasn't come up yet, so he's asked me to proceed. But in the meantime, we have four bills today. The first of those, HB 491, the prime sponsor, Senator Waters, will be here to introduce it. He is in House Transportation at the moment introducing another bill. So I'm expecting we'll take about 10 minutes, and when we see Senator Waters arrive, we'll resume. Okay, all set?
Thank you.
Thank you. And good morning, Senator. Okay, Senator Waters has arrived, and we will resume and proceed with testimony on HB 491. Welcome, Senator Waters.
Good morning.
Representative Ladd is
Thank you so much. I'm Senator David Waters, District 4, here to introduce Senate Bill 491, and I so appreciate your willingness to wait. I had a bill scheduled next door in Public Works, and I have yet to figure out how to be two places at once. And so I really appreciate that you took a little recess so I could be here. Senate Bill 491 is fairly simple in what it does, but I wanted to explain the two important things that I believe that it will do for us. I really want to thank the Department of Education, particularly the Career and Technical Education Center Advisory Council, the State Board of Education, Drew Klein, who all came together to work on this. Let me just explain very briefly why the bill comes with it, and the title was what it was when it was in the Senate and didn't get changed. I have long been very, very concerned that every student in New Hampshire who wants a career in technical education should be able to have it. And Representative Ladd and I think it's 14 years now that we've worked on trying to achieve that goal in a variety of ways. And I really particularly want to make sure that students who have education freedom accounts can do career and technical education if they want. You may recall last year I had my bill that we passed that was a kind of open enrollment for EFA students when it came to CTE, that if their non-public school they were going to was closer to one CTE than having to travel back to maybe where their home is to go to that one, that they could do that. And the bill also said that if you're in CTE, you want to make that your home school, that you can do that too. We've got to make that opportunity. When the open enrollment bills came along, I decided just to kind of pause on the CTE and the EFA, because I was looking at finding some ways to fund those students who want maybe not take a full CTE programs who are EFA students, but that they could take a few courses, that we'd figure out how to get that paid for. I thought it was just good to put that on pause. But one thing the bill does, you'll see, starting on lines 13, is to say, I want these EFA students to know about CTE. And so what this will ask, and the Department of Education is happy to do this, is that there'll be an ability to communicate with all the EFA students that, hey, there is CTE, you want to find out about it, come on over, and if you want to do it, we'll find a way that you can. But connected to that is something else very important, the first part of the bill. As you know, tuition and transportation costs for CTE students from sending to receiving districts has always been an issue for funding, because the way that's set up now, because it's one fund, that the tuition ends up cannibalizing the money available for transportation. So we end up, and I think, shortchanging the districts about how much money we reimburse them for the transportation. Representative Ladd and I worked for many years on this. I worked a lot with Commissioner Adelblue, and there was concern about maintenance of effort under Perkins funding. If you're going to increase this amount of money in here, then you have to agree to sustain that effort in future budgets. And they were a little nervous, about whether or not CTE enrollments were growing. The story at CTE across the state, as you know, is a good story. The enrollments are doing well. We're developing programs which are more in tune with what the future economic needs are and needs of employers. So I think that there's a feeling in the Department of Education now that if we were to raise this amount, we would be able to sustain the number of students and, in fact, grow the number of students in CTE. So what we need to do, as you'll see in this bill, is to split that funding into two separate funds so they don't cannibalize each other. Also, the authority to set that amount had been with the State Board of Education. Now, the Department of Education was doing it anyways, and I talked with Drew Klein, and they said, yeah, it's okay, move that authority over there because they have to make their budget. right? They do the budget prep and they would figure out this. I've also talked, under Commissioner Adelblue, he wasn't willing to raise the effort, but he did agree, we put an extra $2 million in the budget two budgets ago to essentially try to help districts with this. I think moving forward that the commissioner will look very seriously at actually putting this amount as to what it really needs to be to support the system and the sending and receiving schools. So I'm sorry to go on so long about that, but it's something that Representative Ladd and I have been working at for a long time. I think we're going to get there. So the bill, I think, can do two things. It can mean that those students from sending schools who might have been off-ramped or not able to get into a program because their sending district didn't want to pay for the cost of it, I think they'll take care of this. And I think it also makes sure that there's opportunity for the education freedom account students as well. So thank you very much.
Thank you. I think that was very crisp. Questions, Representative Limo?
Thanks very much, Mr. Chair. Thank you very much, Senator, for introducing the bill. So I agree with you that CTE does have a good story to tell, but I think part of the story also, and I think you allude to this, is the lack of state funding support for CTE students. And what I have heard from a number of school districts in the last 2 years is that they have received surprise invoices from their regional CTE centers that they had not planned for and that had not been in their budget. And I was wondering, how does this go about addressing that shortcoming in the story?
Thanks for the question. I will certainly follow up on that with the commissioner and with the directors of the CTE centers. I suspect that it may be driven in part by just the factors here, that the fund for tuition and transportation is not adequate, and so those billings come out. The commissioner, as you know, is a data person. I just was so delighted when Governor Ayotte chose her. I think the governor made a lot of good appointments across the agencies. In particular, she seems to be interested in people who are the worker bees and also the ones who are centered on data. And that's what Commissioner Davis does, is data. And we have, on the advisory council, we are now receiving data that we've never had before. So I think we'll have a much better track, and I think that will mean that there shouldn't be those surprise billings. But I will follow up on that. I do think that this bill in particular, by separating those two funds and setting us up to put sufficient funding in there in the next budget, I think we'll address that problem.
Quick follow-up.
Sure.
Thanks very much, and thanks for doing that. And I think following up with Commissioner Davis, I think would be very helpful on this. My understanding, and this sort of goes back to time on school board as well, that certainly the state was not funding transportation costs to the extent that districts incurred these costs, but those were very predictable for the school district. Where I think these surprise invoices have been coming from have mainly been tied to tuition.
Yeah.
And so
I'll check.
Yeah, and so that, that, and also are school districts are they now being responsible for maybe, student counts that they weren't expecting or something like that? So I think that would all be, I'd love to have clarity on that before we exec on this.
And I'll see what we can find out. It's a good question. I do think, that there are issues about the number of students, in 1 year or another might have gone up from the sending school. And also depending on the program sometimes, because they are differential costs sometimes for the programs. It's the same issue that I was trying to get out with making sure the EFA students can be there. If a CTE program can be $10,000, and that's a whole lot more than the EFA grant, right? And the EFA grant might have been spent on a lot of other things. So I'm really trying, as we move forward in this, to determine and we're working on this in the advisory, what are the costs per program? And therefore, can we have a more rational approach to billing for those costs for the sending schools, and also finding a way so the EFA students don't get kind of double whammied. So I'll try as quick as I can to get an answer to you.
Okay, thank you.
Representative Bricky.
Thank you. Thank you very much for taking my question. So as I read this,
Yeah,
EFA students are already able to take CTE, yes?
yes.
But as I read this, I'm just confused. So the $5,000 won't pay the $10,000 or however much it is for CTE. So who do you want to pay the difference?
Thanks for your question. I think that's the question that needs to be answered in subsequent legislation. Because right now, it is on that family, if their student wants to take CTE, to pay for it.
And this, oops, sorry, go ahead.
Yeah, and this, I don't think we're ready to address that yet because of what's happening with open enrollment. I think that open enrollment is going to drive a lot of decisions about how things are being funded. Now, I think it's pretty clear, you know, that if a student wants to enroll fully in CTE, it's just, they're going to have to be there almost all day anyways. It probably makes sense for the parents to think about just enrolling their child in that school, because then the costs are taken care of, you know, and they're not having to scramble to come up with extra money and so on. What I'm thinking about, you know, a lot of schools have, in for sophomore year, even before, sample courses where a student can come in and 2 weeks at a time, you know, for 2 weeks each, look at the different programs, figure out, do I really want this, or do I really want to do this, or is it which program, would I like it or not? Or let's say a student comes in and takes the first semester and says, oh, it's not for me. This isn't for me. I'd like to find out a way that, you know, we can handle that cost. But this bill is purely informational. If a student might have been in EFA eventually from first grade on, you know, and I want to make sure when they hit ninth grade that they know about EFA. I mean, the EFA students know about CT, so at least that piece can get done.
So you're not, this in no way will put the districts on the hook for the difference. The difference would still be for the parents.
Thanks for your question. And yeah, this doesn't change anything that exists now. I would like to keep working on the larger issues around EFA to make sure that the students can, you know, that we can handle the way it's financed and make sure they can do it if they want. So that's for next year.
Okay, I am chair of my local school board, and we got one of those bills that Representative Luno was speaking about. And
I appreciate it.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
You signed up. Representative Damon.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you for taking my question. So under current law, who decides whether the CTE center charges the family, overlooks the costs beyond the EFA fund, or requires them to enroll in the district? I don't know that they could require them, but encourages them to. Who makes those decisions?
At this point, it would be, I believe, the local school board, or, you know, the SAU. If a student who is getting EFA wants to enroll in CTE, they're going to have to pay. And it has to be space available and so on, like, and for any other student, you know, because some programs have limited space and there's waiting lists and so on. But right now, and I think this is a problem, right now, we don't have a mechanism, and there's nothing in statute is just silent. If you get an EFA under existing statute, if you want to do CTE, you got to pay. Now, I had looked at, well, would there be a way to, if somebody wants to do CTE, that we have in statute that EFA grant is apportioned into that, or this and that. It just got very complicated when the open enrollment came. Everything just, you know, open enrollment has to settle, right? Before I think we can get at the particular questions about EFA and CTE.
Well,
Yeah, follow up, and then Representative Dawson.
so perhaps I'm not understanding what you said or what the fiscal note says, because they're different. The fiscal note says under current law, CTE districts may charge tuition to an EFA family.
Right. Right.
Require the student to enroll in their resident district to receive CTE services, or may provide CTE services free of charge. But you just indicated, I believe, that the CTE center would charge them.
Well,
I'm trying to get at discrepancies between, not discrepancies, differences
Yeah.
between districts and the inequities of that.
That's right. And thank you for that correction. I think part of the problem is that the fiscal note did not change from the original bill, which did directed the Department of Education to figure out a system whereby appropriate charges would be made and gave guidance to that. That part of the bill went away when open enrollment came along, but the fiscal note didn't change for it. This bill, as far as the EFAs go, says we're going to make sure that students get information. And then the other part of the bill is the tuition and transportation stuff. So, I think what you're pointing to is that we've got to solve some problems, because it says may, it says these things, but well, what's going to be appropriate? And it should really be this piecemeal thing that some districts, are going to, it's hard to imagine right now, a school board wants to swallow the cost. So I think I want to explain how the bill came here and it had this remnant fiscal note, because I think it's an issue we've got to address in the future. But I fell back to doing what we can do now, information. But I would like for us to have this discussion over the summer and in the fall when we file, of how, what are we going to do about, what are we going to do to help to make this work?
Representative Ellis.
Yes, this may be, could get pretty technical, and I don't know if we have somebody from the Department of Education to answer. Are they here?
Yeah.
Oh, okay, so, I'll wait and ask them the question. Thank you.
And if I may, again, Chairman, just apologize for going off into the EFA funding thing. It's very complicated. I just thought I should mention it. Though the bill, this bill in itself is very simple. It just says give them information and let's do what's necessary to set up the next budget to do the tuition and transportation. That's what this bill is. But we've got to work on some other things.
Representative McGuire.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you, Senator, for taking my question. So regarding this tuition transportation thing, I don't know what the actual numbers are, but let's suppose the current budget is 10 million. You want it to be two separate things of 5 million each, or maybe 6 and 4 or something like that. Okay. Why do you think that would be advantageous? I don't quite understand that.
Thanks for the question. I think it'd be advantageous in two ways. I think that what it would give is the capacity for the department, using its data, to actually make more realistic apportionments between the two. Because right now, as we hear about the billing, it's one pot of money. Transportation costs, I heard diesel hit $5.99 this morning at some gas stations, and I hope this is all done by the fall. But just imagine what transportation costs might be because of inflation, but that always, there's always going to be a change in costs, contract assigned or so on and so forth. So like that, it would rationalize it. But I think it also, let's say around 10 million now, 15 or 16 million is probably what'll do it to fix this problem. So that's this I hope would tee up the capacity for the commissioner to make that request, and then we'll see how the budget process plays out next year.
Thank you.
Representative Papavici-Miller.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you, Senator, for being
see you.
here.
Good to see you.
I do appreciate the challenge of being in multiple places at once. I thought if anybody knew how to do that, it was the Senate. Yes. But basically, I think we've had a long discussion about this bill, and when I look at it, it really does two things. One is just that pure information, hey, those programs are aware, which is just letting people know you are eligible for stuff you are already eligible for. And the other thing is that minor accounting change because we want to have two separate funds. Am I missing any hidden complexity here?
Well, thank you, Representative. And here you are, the rambling professor here. You've boiled it down to the essence. And the answer is yes. No, you're not missing anything, and yes, you got it just right. And it also moves the authority for setting those budgets up over from the State Board of Education, which God knows why I was there in the first place.
So there you go. I was missing
Board of
something. Thank you.
Education. So you got it.
It sounds to me like the potential additional complexity was left on the cutting room floor in the Senate.
Yeah, yeah.
Okay. Representative Burton.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you, Senator. We both know how to be in two places because when you were a professor of English and I was assistant dean, we were both in the House, as I recall. I'm going to ask you a naive question. Why would a student who wanted CTE take an EFA? Why not just go from their school?
Well, thanks for the question. I think the good thing about the EFA program is that it is individualized and lets families and individual students make their choices. And I think that's important. And I think that we ought to adjust our systems to accommodate that. I think in particular on the informational piece here, so the student may be in a non-public school from first grade, homeschooled or non-public school. And they get to ninth grade, they're probably trying to figure out by even in middle school, who am I, what do I want to do? And, the CTs have wonderful open houses, tours, and industry has open houses and so on. And so I just want to make sure that they would now. Now, that larger question about why wouldn't they do this or that, I think it's up for families to decide, and also the individual student who may want to take the sampler course, or may want to go to a particular school that has a particularly good program in welding or in business or in healthcare. And they'd have that choice, and then the family would have the choice to decide what financially that they may have wanted to do. I think, let me just mention one other piece of this and why it was probably good to just wait. There's a very strong bipartisan interest in Congress on funding, increasing funding for trades, for apprenticeships. Very strong bipartisan. President, leaders of Congress. And I've talked with one particular congressperson who was very interested and said, look, he wanted to start 1,000 new trade schools. Cross country said, you don't need to do that. We've got CTE. Double the Perkins funding. And we will just drive our economy forward through CTE. So I think something may well happen in the next budget, and we'll be in a very different place in terms of federal money coming in and helping make sure students, and I think what it'll also mean is that for the EFA students, some of the pressure will be off as to how we fund things. So I'm very hopeful about this. I think people really get it now that we've got to support career and technical education.
Thank you, Senator. Appreciate it.
Representative Ames.
Thank you, and good morning.
Morning.
I've listened carefully to all this information about the bill, and I'm trying to understand why legislation is needed to accomplish what is left of the main purpose of this bill, which is to separate costs into two piles. Can't that be done without the legislation?
Thanks for your question. On the tuition transportation, we do have to amend the statute. As you'll see on line 4, instead of state board, it says department. And then also we do need that word separately. And then you'll see on lines 10 to 12, there does need to be legislative authority for establishing funds. So that does need to be done. Also, I believe that we do, if we're asking a non-state agency, the scholarship organization, to do something, then there is statute governing the scholarship organization, as you know. I think we need to do that there. And the Department of Education is willing to, to provide the links to the website and any flyers, brochures, anything that they want. But I think we do need both these in statute.
All right. Has everybody had an opportunity?
Thank you so
Thank
much.
you very much, Senator Waters. I have no other pink cards. Does the department wish to address the bill? Good morning.
On.
You may
Sorry
want to
about
pull it
that.
a little closer as well.
Is it working now?
There you go.
Okay, great. Good morning. Thank you for having me. I'm Chrissy Vanderhook. I'm the administrator for the Bureau of Career Development. In that role, I oversee the Office of Career and Technical Education and the Office of Adult Education. So I'm here to answer any questions that you may have.
Representative Fellows.
Thank you. And if you could pull the microphone closer to you.
You got it.
That would help. So my question is, if you can you explain to us the financial part of this? Because I see something in the bill here. It's related to the sending district pays 25% of the career and technical receiving districts cost per pupil for that program.
Certainly.
So tell us, like, what does the district have to pay? What do they get for state aid in the Perkins Fund, so we can see how all the cost figures fit together. And I assume that programs have different costs depending on what they are. So
Correct. All right, so I will start first of all in RSA 188E6. That is where the cost for students attending career and technical education comes from. It looks like you have that pulled up, and that's where the sending district is noted as being financially responsible for 25% of that CTE tuition cost. So the sending districts know from the beginning that they will be responsible for that 25%. How that tuition cost is determined is based on a percentage of the previous year's DOE 25 cost per pupil for each individual district. So it does vary by district. It also varies by, in some cases, program, or it may just be that it depends on the school. So each regional career and technical center lets us know what portion of that cost per pupil is the determined cost rate for tuition, which is between 20 and 40% of the cost per pupil for the receiving district. And so that is how the cost is determined. The tuition cost is a percentage of the annual cost per pupil of the receiving district from the prior year.
just as a little clarification on that part. So are the programs, how are they distinguishing one CTE program from another program? If you're just taking a percentage of the total cost per pupil,
So
saying what is CTE's percentage?
some regional CTE centers determine it just as a percentage of the overall cost per pupil, and they say on average, they aggregate it and say on average, we're going to say this is our tuition rate across all CTE programs. There are other CTE centers that will let us know, you know what, our cost for a welding program is far higher than a cost for our business program, and so we're going to set the rate for that program at a higher rate for tuition for that particular program. So it depends on each center, letting us know how if they're going to determine it in aggregate or if they're going to determine it based program by program, because there are certain costs that are different between programs. And it also depends on what programs are offered at each center, because they're not all the same. Thank you for your question. Oh, sorry. Okay, so the federal money is allocated to each center at the beginning of the year and is not pertinent to the tuition portion. Each CTE center, regional center, is allocated a certain amount based on the percentage that is determined by statute under Perkins 5, which is federal legislation. That formula is based on two factors. It is based on the sending districts to that CTE center is based on their population. So I believe it's 30% is based on population. I believe 70% of that formula is based on poverty within that sending catchment area. And so that is how the Perkins funds are disseminated. Those are supplemental funds that are used to support each year. The programs will say, these are the things that we're going to use these federal funds for. They have to be able to supplement. They can't supplant, meaning they can't pay for things that local or state has paid for before. And so those funds are separate from the conversation that we're having today. So the tuition payment, the remaining funds, when the local district has paid their 25%, we, at the department, have a $9 million fund in the ongoing budget to disseminate for tuition and transportation. And then that formula is also written in statute. And so I have some information about that if you have further questions. Did that answer?
Representative Luna?
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair. Thanks very much for being here for some technical help. So just to be clear, it says in the fiscal note that that 26 EFA students are receiving CTE or are enrolled in CTE were enrolled in CTE last year. So I was just wondering how. I guess how is the CTE center or the district that's hosting the CTE center billing these students now? And are when you referred to the 25% share that the local school district, the resident school district, would assume, are they assuming 25% tuition cost for these 26 CFA students as well?
I think that's a two-part question. Thank you for it. Okay. Yeah. So let me just make sure I'm understanding. Part one, how are the districts determining for the sending districts, how are they being billed? Correct. Those bills are being sent from the CTE regional center to the sending districts. So they are receiving district and the sending district. They are in an agreement together. Those invoices are sent directly from one district to the other to be paid. So does that answer the first part of your question?
Well, not quite, because it was specific to the 26 EFA students. So the receiving district, the CTE district, is billing the sending school district for the EFA students. Is that what I heard?
Not for the EFA students. That was just for students who are enrolled in their sending school.
So I'm talking about the both parts of the question are specific to these 26
sorry
students.
About that. Yeah. So I do have an answer to that. I actually just recently researched this. So under current law, if an EFA student is either receiving their education at home or at a non-public school and they choose to attend the CTE center, as you all have spoken about before, they can use their EFA funds. However, there is no additional funding that comes from the state to support those students because they've received their EFA funds. So that they do not factor into the tuition and transportation reimbursement. And if the local district is billing the sending district, if the receiving district is billing the sending district for those students, that would be out of my awareness.
Out of your awareness.
Correct. And it's not, that would not be something that is not in the law as such.
Okay, so
just on this point, to clarify, the very next sentence, I think, in this fiscal report indicates that there's three possibilities and the department doesn't know which one is being followed.
Right, and so that's why I think I think it would be fair for this committee to understand how the billing is being done specifically for these EFA students. We don't need to know their names or anything like that or where they're from, but is the CTE center, the district that is hosting the CTE center, billing the students directly, and then some of that's being paid with EFA funds, the rest being paid just the same way a private school would be. That's all I'm really asking.
Thank you for your question. I have Director Melissa White here to support this as well.
That chair is not big enough to
No, it's really not.
Melissa White, Division Director for Learner Support. Thank you for the question. So with the EFA students, they would have to go directly to that district. Even if they live in another district and they're wanting to enroll in some other district's CTE program, they would have to go and reach out to that CTE program, and then the scholarship organization would cover the cost to that district to cover the CTE, and then the parents would have to pay any remaining costs for that.
Okay.
That sending district would not be involved at all.
Thank you. That helps to clarify it, because I think it was.
So it's an acceptable claim against the EFA subject to the limits of what's
Correct.
available.
And so that would be worked out through the scholarship organization and the parent to pay the district where that a child is attending the CTE program.
Exactly the same as any other educational opportunity would be done.
I concur with that.
Okay.
Yeah.
Thank you. I think that helps a lot.
Representative Damon?
Oh,
Or did you have something more?
Yeah, and I guess actually the second part of the question was the 25% local share of the resident district, but it sounds like that doesn't apply in the case of EFAs.
Correct.
So, did you want to follow up?
Representative Damon.
So I have a follow-up to that and I have a separate question. So the 25% doesn't come from the state to the CTE Center for students who are attending and have an EFA. Does the CTE Center, if they charge tuition to the EFA student, incorporate that 25% so that the EFA student's tuition cost would be greater than a student who is partially funded by the state?
That is I think they set whatever rate that they have, and then, so they're determining a rate, like the 25%, let's take that out of it. There's a rate that's determined, the 25% that's paid here and paid over here, the 75 is like state 75, 25% local district. Separate when you're looking at an EFA student, because when they're determining the cost per pupil for that service for that student, it's going to be determined at that local level. If you're taking this welding course, this is what we charge for that welding course, therefore you're going to pay this amount. Now, they may decide to charge a different amount. They may decide to, oh, we're only going to charge you this. That's just something that is worked out at the local level and determined at the local level of exactly how much they're going to charge that EFA student to participate. And then any costs, they work that out with the scholarship organization directly. So it's really a local level and a scholarship organization and not something the department is overseeing or involved with.
Okay, I think we've gotten deep into mechanics behind the scene that go well beyond the scope of this bill, so let's bring it back. Representative McGuire.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you, Ms. White and Ms. Vanderhook for coming. Ms. Vanderhook, I think I heard you say that there are not $9 million is the amount in the budget for the tuition and transportation grants. And is this one of those kind of grants where it's prorated? If say the need was $15 million, then everybody who requests money would get 60% of their request?
The formula is not written in that way. So we
Okay.
take, and I will point you to where that formula is determined, which comes from the administrative rules, Ed Rules 1305, which determines the tuition cost. And then the transportation cost is in Ed Rules 130503. The cost that is, the tuition is set. So we have the 9 million, and the law says that transportation comes out first from that 9 million, and the transportation that is currently charged is at 10 students per student per mile. And I have some figures if you'd like me to share regarding how much of the 9 million that has been determined at historically. Then the remaining funds, after an additional cost is taken out for alternative education, which is a very small portion of that 9 million, is then taken, and we say, okay, how much do we have left per student who was enrolled? And each student gets that dollar amount. So it's based on the amount remaining of the 9 million to give to tuition and how many students are eligible for that tuition reimbursement. And that dollar amount is given per student to reimburse the regional CTE center.
I see. May I follow up slightly?
Yes.
So, but we heard earlier that some programs are much more expensive. Welding is more expensive than computers or something. And so therefore, but you're saying if there's one welder and one computer person, they each get the same amount for tuition. Is that right?
Thank you for your question, but from the state tuition reimbursement fund.
Yes, from this part that we're dealing with here.
Correct.
Gotcha. And if I may, one more. So let's suppose you put 4 million in transportation and 5 million in tuition or something. How would that change this? I guess some transportation might be unpaid, right? If you paid more tuition, the transportation might come up short, right? You wouldn't be able to do the 10 cents a mile or whatever it is, right?
I mean, they're essentially separate now, even though we've got $9 million for that fund. So because we're paying transportation first, like the formulas figured out for both transportation and tuition are actually separate. It's just the fund that we pay them out of is one. So if we take and pay transportation first, whatever's left over gets paid for tuition. So however you want to split that, if you're going to split them into two and then not allow, I mean, I guess it depends on how it's written. If we're only going to pay for, part of the transportation, or we pay transportation first, or we're allowing, anything left over to go towards one or the other. But I mean, for right now, the way that it's set, they are separate.
But, Mayo, just one last. What determines you doing transportation first is your rules, not law. Is that correct?
Correct.
Okay, so you made that decision when you wrote the rules.
The State Board of Education made.
Well, fine, but the bill changes it, so it'll be up to you.
And that piece we have to clarify too. We did talk with Council Brown, and she said we have to make that clear that the State Board of Education has rulemaking authority, Department of Education does not. So changing it here doesn't change the fact that the State Board of Education still has to be the one to make the rule.
Yeah, I was wondering about that. Okay, thank you very
We want to
much.
keep that change. We don't want.
That was a good point to bring up. Okay. We're going on an hour, on a half-hour hearing, so let's keep them pointed. Representative Luna.
So thanks very much. And going on an hour after a 15-minute delayed start. So
I stand by my point. Please keep it sharp.
But just a couple things specific to this, and I think this goes back to what Representative Ames had asked. How necessary is this, given the fact that in the first part you've already got separate accounts for tuition and transportation, and in the second part, and I'm actually looking at 194F4, and my understanding is that the organization that manages the program already sends information out. So is it necessary for there to be a law change for the organization that manages the program to send information out about CTE, or can they do that anyway?
Oh, they can do that anyway, yes.
Okay, thank you.
Representative Damon.
Very concisely, I just want to hear the department's remarks about a 10-cent per mile transportation fee contrasted with what transportation costs.
I'd say that's something we've been looking at for years, because it's something that we should be looking to study. And I believe and you could probably speak better to this than I can, Chrissy, the committee that met over the past year and then put out a report, I think that was part of their report, was their recommendations was to take a look at that piece.
Yes, the CTE Renovation and Construction Advisory put out a report regarding how to look at tuition reimbursement in addition to looking at how we are supporting. Oh, I'm sorry, I'm thinking of the wrong one. The transportation, sorry. We had a transportation advisory that spun off of the CTE Advisory Council, and they did suggest that we look deeper into that.
I think the concern has always been with the idea of increasing our maintenance of effort, because if we up the 9 million now, there's no going back. Really, we have to commit to providing that in the future. So I know that that's always been a concern. And I want to say 2 bienniums ago, they allocated, I think it was 2 bienniums ago, they allocated $4 million for transportation costs to cover costs that districts needed to get reimbursed for with transportation when they were sending students, but also then to look at some opportunities for the future on how to support transportation. And so we did run that competitive grant. We had $4 million to distribute. We've been distributing that over the past 4 years. 3 years. And so we're just about finished with our last round of that. And so we have been using that to supplement those transportation needs to make sure that we're helping out in any way to cover those costs.
Representative Fellows.
Yes, just if you could give us some suggestions about what you might be able to do to eliminate the surprise billing and the surprise in terms of how much money they're going to get the reimbursement for? Because I read in the statute, they don't get reimbursed until the next year. So kind of like adequacy aid. So do you have some data you can maybe collect and publish for enrollment early in the year that will help those surprises not happen?
Yes, I think we can work on that. Thank you for the suggestion. I appreciate that.
Okay, very good. Thank you. I think we're all set. So
Thank you. Thank you.
I'm going to close the hearing on HB 491. So our next bill is HB 513. I believe the sponsor was conflicted and had a spokesman who intended to introduce. Is there anybody here to introduce this bill? Representative McGuire will do the favor. Okay, this bill will look familiar, similar to one we had last year. And Representative McGuire, thank you for stepping in.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Representative Dan McGuire. I'd like to introduce Senate Bill 513, requiring schools to engage an owner's project manager for construction of school building aid projects at the time of application.
Do you care to speak further or to take questions or?
Well, I just sent you a pink card which says I oppose the bill. So maybe if there's anybody who supports the bill, they should go first. I don't know.
I'm not sure if there's anybody else here who's looking to speak on the bill.
Okay.
So,
well, then let me explain what I wanted to say. Okay. So I looked up the history of this while we were waiting, and you may recall last year we had Senate Bill 209, which is essentially identical to this bill. And what happened with that bill is we as a committee created an amendment. It was Amendment 2275H of 2025. And that amendment basically took away the applies for if you and the have engaged, and just changed the amount to, at the original law was $1 million. It changed it to $1,250,000, and it added the phrase that you see on line 9, owner's project, ensure the best interests are carried out. So we had an amendment. We put the amendment, we passed it 18-0. We put it on the consent calendar. It got taken off this got to be the silly season, right? Because it was the Senate bill. And so it got taken off the consent calendar. It got amended with a floor amendment having to do with litigation funding, something or other. And the Senate rejected it. All right. But there was a separate committee of conference on some other bill, and that committee of conference added back into House Bill 506 essentially the amendment that we had created as a group, right, that the Ed Funding Committee has created. So what you see in law right now is our amendment from last year on this bill, okay? So this bill, Senate Bill 513, wants to change it back to what the prime sponsor originally wanted, right, which we had already rejected and so on. So I think we should just say we're happy because what we did last year is now law, and therefore we don't have to change it. You know, we already thought about this and so on. Thank you.
Okay, are there any questions? Okay, very good. Thank you, Representative McGuire. Is there anybody else here to speak on the bill? Okay, seeing nobody, I'm going to close the hearing on SB 513.
I'm back.
Okay. All right. Well, that puts us on time to move on to our third bill, and that's SB 531, establishing a task force to study the feasibility of the creation of cosmetology-related programming in Coos County. And we have our frequent flyer, Senator Waters,
Thank
back to
you.
introduce this bill, on which he's also the prime sponsor.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman and members of the committee. I'm Senator David Waters, District 4, to introduce Senate Bill 531. What this bill will do is to establish a task force to study the feasibility of the creation of cosmetology-related program in Coos County. You'll see how, excuse me, didn't finish my cough drop in time. You'll see that the bill sets up this committee, and it has on it folks that are involved with cosmetology, with the Department of Education, and with the nearby White Mountain Community College. The second part of the bill has to do with the authority of the Commissioner of Education to designate certain places as CTE program places, and I will talk about why they're both in the same bill and how especially the second part may set us up to do some very creative and exciting things for CTEs and for community college education. This bill is timely because last year, as you may recall, we passed a bill to change the number of hours required for cosmetology from 1,500 to 1,200, which aligns very well with the standards that are needed to have credentialing and licensing in this program. And the effect of that was twofold. First, it meant that you could, in a full 2-year CTE program, complete 1,200 hours and then be able to go forward to take your licensing exam, get your certification, and get to work. Prior to that point, if you had to have the 1,500 hours, you couldn't quite finish all of that potentially in your high school CTE program. You have to go out and potentially spend tens of thousands of dollars for private education on that. So the other reason for the bill is because we don't have a full cosmetology program north of Laconia. And there are not the private professional schools north of Concord, as I understand it at this point. So CTE cosmetology programs are drivers of economic development, particularly for young women. They can get their training, they can go out and get a job, and a lot of them start businesses, and they stay where they are, and especially in the North Country. There's a, I think that we're going to take a look at, and there's been some preliminary study from the community college system about, the job market and so on. These studies are always necessary for any CTE program. Now, there are some centers that will have the 1 year. They have a 1-year program, one instructor, one classroom. So the necessity is then to expand it to a couple of instructors and to have the facilities. Some facilities such as Dover and a couple of places, they actually have salons that have the public or cut all the Razzi hair, or in Dover they have a program, the wigs that cancer patients have, they work with the industry and they receive those wigs from patients and they clean them and restyle them and they have them ready to go for other patients. There's all kinds of creative things that they do, and cosmetology isn't just about hair, it's about makeup and other kind of aesthetic treatments as well, and they get terrific training. And the potential is there for there to be a salon open, that can serve the public. So they really get a terrific training, and it helps potentially build up the North Country. We cannot expect a student who wants to do cosmetology to somehow get themselves down from Berlin or for Haverhill down to Laconia or to Dover or to Concord or elsewhere. We heard from cosmetology instructors and a lot of students about the benefits of this for workforce needs in Northern New Hampshire, for enhancing educational access and career pathways and collaboration and resource efficiency, particularly if we have a combination with the community college system of New Hampshire. So that's why I want to point to the second part of the bill. Representative Ladd and I and others have worked for many years now trying to think about new ways to use the funding that we get from Perkins for construction and renovation of CTE centers. We've almost gone through the entire 25 or so centers who every few decades they become available to have funding for construction of a new center or renovation of an existing center. So, and it's costly. We have in the capital budget can have $10-20 million plus each capital budget to cover this. So the idea, and a lot of conversation with Commissioner Ada Blue and continuing now, is that can we become more focused on actual program needs? So that let's say there's a real employer developing a real need an area for a particular kind of manufacturing or something else, why not be able to provide some of that Perkins funding for construction and renovation, specifically directed to particular classes of programs? I think that'd be more nimble for the job force. The second thought, though, is that why should we, if there is a CTE center or several of them right near a community college system, why can't we look at having a joint facility that could be on the community college system campus, that community college systems who could take the courses there, you might be able to share instructors, which would take some of the costs off of a local school district. And also there's the opportunity for industry support. Right now, the auto dealer is no better example of that, are providing apprenticeships, they're paying for equipment, so on and so forth, into the auto program, particularly up in northern New England with the diesel trucking program, which is the only one in the state, and great industry support serves such a significant need. So this bill then, it's about the cosmetology. We ought to look at that. I think it'd be great. More cosmetology programs, I think, are essential for economic development, and particularly in the North Country. But also, this might be an opportunity to test out this new model, to have this group to get together to see, okay, there is northern border financing available every 3 years to White Mountain Community College. They got one a year or so ago. They're expanding with that, but the next time that comes around, they might be able to get some money to build a second classroom, to have a public-facing salon and so forth. So I think I'm very excited about the potential here, not just for cosmetology, but as potentially designated a new model. And that's why the second part of the bill gives the Department of Education the authority to designate a community college campus as a location for CTE education. Thank you.
Thank you, Senator. Representative Popovich-Miller.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you. Welcome again. I'm just curious. Obviously, it is clear that there is a lack of supply, in the northern part of the state, but the task force seems to be very, very specific to Berlin. Is there any reason why we kind of, put Berlin in there instead of leaving it to just the Coos County or the northern part of the state?
Thanks for your question. I think there's a real synergy there in that they already have the one-year program and a very good and active instructor there. They're very, very close to White Mountain Community College, so the capacity of having a joint facility and sharing that. But also Berlin is the receiving CTE for a lot of areas in the North Country. And so in various programs, they already have students coming from other school districts. So it seemed like it's, if you're going to do something well in the North Country, that this probably is the best place that it could be. But as I said, this is a model. If it's not just cosmetology, if this idea of being able, I looked very closely at, Concord High School was building a new high school, and I thought, wait a minute, why aren't there some CTE facilities over at the community college, and then and also with dual and concurrent enrollment. I do envision kind of a K through 14 system for our state eventually, that the dual and concurrent enrollment, which is very successful, and the CTE students in junior and senior could be spending much of their time on the community college campus. So I like to think big, but this bill, I don't want to do it like the last hearing. This bill is what it is. It gets the task force together to study cosmetology program up there, and then grants authority to the commissioner to designate, in her current authority to designate locations of CTE, to be able to now designate a community college campus as one. Thank you. Thanks for your question.
Representative Fellows.
Thank you. Since I know we're not, we're ahead of time here, I wonder if you think that there's any possibility to integrate this model with the Go North project.
Thanks so much for that question. I am just thrilled by what the governor has proposed in the Go North. I think it's a terrific plan. And I'm particularly thrilled by her designation of substantial funding going to the community college system and the partnership with CTEs. And I know that the Department of Education, they've got some people already looking at this and work, get together with the community college systems. I think that's just a terrific opportunity that the governor has set up. And once again, that's health field directed, but I just so much think this is a way that we could really grow and serve economic development industries and our young people in the state.
Representative Burton.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you, Senator. For the 13 years I was president of North Shore Community College, our Cosmo program was located on Essex Technical Institute's campus. And it worked really, really well. And I along with culinary arts, I think we also had partnerships. So this is a really great idea. Would you believe I believe that?
I believe it. I'm glad to hear it.
Thank you.
Thank you, Representative.
Representative McGuire.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you, Senator, for taking my question. I know that the House Speaker is not very fond of studies, and so maybe not as much as the Senate. So is the reason that we need a study for this and Berlin cannot just go ahead and expand their own program as they, on their own initiative, is it that fact that you want it to be joint with the community college?
Thanks for your question. Exactly. And some other folks here that ought to be able to offer their expertise. And let me say, in respect to the Speaker and the Senate President, this is not a study. There are no legislators on it. Yes! So these people get together, they'll do their work fairly expeditiously, and I think it'll set us up for some good things in next year's capital budget.
Thank you.
Everyone smiles together at that.
Yeah, really. No legislators.
Representative Leno.
Thanks very much, Mr. Chair, and thanks very much, Senator, for bringing this forward. Are CTEs that currently offer cosmetology recognized by the Board of Cosmetology for licensing?
Yeah, thanks for the question. So any student from whatever school they're coming from goes and takes their exam. And our students do that. The ones who just have the one-year program at the high schools, they're going to be going to Empire or some other place to finish up their hours, and then they'll take their exam. The schools that have the 2-year program, those students finish their hours, they graduate, they go take their exam.
Great.
And they do really well.
Great. And follow up. And so this is I'm forget, it's 1,200 hours or 1,500 hours, 1,200 hours. So if they can get that through their CTE, they're approved by the board and they can go directly to the exam.
Get to work. Yep.
Terrific. Thank you.
Representative Fellows.
I just want to ask you about the second part and the part about the amending part that says joint programs with community colleges. And I'm wondering why it doesn't include the university system.
Thanks for your question. Really, the CTE and the kind of certification and credentialing people get is really very much directed towards the community college system, the dual concurrent enrollment and so forth. And I think that and a lot of students, of course, do go from CCSNH into the university system in New Hampshire. But in terms of the kind of education that's being done related to career and technical education at the community college campuses, that this idea of having shared facilities is appropriate there and not necessarily at the community college. I mean, excuse me, at the university system.
I'm just wondering if you're aware that Plymouth State gives out, awards significant number of certifications around the robotics and things like that. You don't think that would fit in?
I think let's get started. Thanks, Peter. I think let's get started, and I think students would have a choice if they're in this program that's oriented towards robotics or something in their high school education. If they want to go right over to Plymouth, great. If they'd rather, because of the cost, because do a concurrent enrollment, you might get a whole year of your tuition for free and get that done. And then you're just 1 year at the CCSNH, and that's gonna be a whole lot cheaper than the university system, so that they might choose that route and then go to Plymouth. So I think this is a good place to start.
Excellent. Seeing no further questions.
Thank you so much.
Senator Waters.
Thank you, committee.
And I'm going to recognize Shannon Reed on behalf of CCASNH. Welcome.
Thank you. Good morning. Good morning. For the record, my name is Shannon Reed. I am Director of Government Affairs and Communications for the Community College System of New Hampshire, and I'm here testifying in support of Senate Bill 531. I'd like to start just with some background about workforce programs at the community colleges. Our workforce development programs focus on delivering short-term, high-impact training programs that align with regional labor market demand, prepare students with relevant job-ready, industry-ready skills, lead to livable wages, and promote long-term economic mobility. Effective workforce development strategies are especially critical in the North Country, where poverty rates exceed those in other regions of the state and median household income is significantly lower. Our workforce development programs play a key role in reducing economic disparities and expanding access to sustainable local employment opportunities. Our workforce credentials all serve as a point of entry into the workforce and a stepping stone toward further education and training. Our program design for our workforce programs prioritizes immediate earnings potential and stackable pathways into other levels of education. So why explore cosmetology? We believe that establishing a cosmetology task force is a strategic opportunity because there are, as Senator Waters pointed out, no cosmetology schools within a commutable distance of Coos County, which creates a significant access barrier. Labor market data indicates demand for cosmetology-related occupations in the region, and wages meet or exceed livable wage benchmarks. Cosmetology can serve as a gateway into broader career pathways, including business management, massage therapy, and professions related to the hospitality and resort workforce in the North Country. Additionally, most cosmetology programs include barbering, which has experienced a notable resurgence in the last 10 or 15 years. Integrating barbering could broaden employment opportunities and strengthen overall workforce outcomes. So for the work of the task force, we see some of the key challenges it would address would include that it's unlikely that the community college workforce development department could independently launch and sustain a cosmetology program. A collaborative model with the career and technical education centers may offer a more sustainable approach. For example, CTE students would utilize the space during the day, and then adult learners who obviously are no longer in high school or CTE centers could access the programming during evenings or on weekends. Additional considerations the task force could explore would be the availability of qualified staff. Also startup and long-term funding, housing availability for adult learners if that's an issue identified by the task force, and then adequate facilities and physical space. So just to sum up, we believe that with thoughtful planning, strong collaboration, and community input, a cosmetology program has the potential to expand access to training and careers, support economic mobility, and contribute to sustainable workforce development in the North Country. I would be happy to take any questions.
Thank you. Representative Bricky.
Thank you. Thank you for taking my question. Shannon, is there space in the Berlin for a cosmetology program?
I think that there could be. We are continually kind of looking at reconfiguring space, making sure that we are transitioning from less usable to more usable space, depending on programming evolution.
Thank you.
Representative Luno.
Thanks very much. So, and thank you very much, Ms. Reed, for testifying here. I'm very interested in obviously the community college perspective on this, but specific to Section 2 on the second page of the bill, the where it talks about the community colleges, the community college campuses. It doesn't limit program expansion to Berlin or to cosmetology. And I'm just wondering if that creates, some side of, a problem or mission creep for the community colleges, or in any way diminishes the relevance of CTE centers, comprehensive CTE centers at our regional, high school centers. And otherwise, I'm very supportive, and I'm glad you're supporting this. But I'm just trying to tease out if there's any potential conflict here. Split CTE centers, even in the Concord area, creating more difficulties in terms of transportation and what else may be offered during the school day, after school type work, things like that.
Thank you. Thank you for the question. I think part of that question would be best answered by folks from the CTE level, but I think we would see this as an opportunity for conversations about what is optimal for the students and the taxpayers. We already have a number of interesting and innovative partnerships with high schools. For example, Manchester Community College houses the Spark Academy, which is a charter school that's located physically at MCC and focuses on technology. And there's so much beneficial integration in terms of the classes students can take, the instructors who kind of go between both and serve for those students as a bridge from secondary to post-secondary. We have other models that are part of our dual and concurrent enrollment program. So I can't answer your question fully, but I think that we would see this language as an opportunity to explore what works best as we look forward at the education landscape in New Hampshire. I think perhaps the prime sponsor wishes to answer.
Looks like Senator Waters can help us on this.
So this language in section 2 was what was brought to me from the commissioner. And it was both because we had a lot of conversations, going back with years with Representative Ladd and Commissioner Adable about a model. And that the thought was that this is appropriate language, not just for Berlin, but would open the door for the commissioner and the community college system to have discussions about might this model potentially work elsewhere. So that's why the language is just the way it is.
Representative Papichi-Maurer.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and thank you for being here and testifying. As you may remember, I used to be, engaged in technical training for about a decade of my life. So would it be fair to say that due to the nature of the classes and the people that you serve, CCSNH has a much greater need for flexibility in terms of what programs and classes they may need to offer in any given year, and therefore they should be allowed to, have more general purpose spaces and then use them as appropriate?
I think thank you for the question. I think that's certainly a good point. We certainly would not want to do anything that diminishes the potency of the CTEs. They're an incredibly important partner for the community colleges. They do great work. I think though there are synergies that could be explored, both in terms of, if the programming is similar, but, adult learners who are needing to pivot career, in their career or looking to enter the workforce, obviously they don't have access to CTE centers, but if there was something that was sort of a joint, a co-location or some other model, then that would potentially make broader use of the same kinds of equipment and facilities. In a previous bill, it was discussed that a welding program is more expensive than a business program. Well, those economics are important to us as well, of course. And so this language, we just think, presents an opportunity for conversations about how to effectively innovate for the future of education, but without diminishing the reach and the impact and the benefits of the CTE programs.
Representative Burton.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you. My question is a little more of a statement, but do you agree with me that in cosmetology, they set up small businesses, and one of the advantages of having the cosmetology associated with the college was we had the Small Business Development Center for Northeast Massachusetts. And many of the students took management, accounting, licensing, all of those skills, such that one of the graduates of cosmetology became my best consultant to all small businesses. It's an aspect that may be overlooked if you just think of people serving customers. But the owners of those are setting up a small business and they get very skilled at it. And I think that's one of the reasons the synergy between the college and the Cosmo programs was so important.
Thank you. I think that makes sense. I think in my testimony, I referred to one kind of potential career avenue for students in this program being business management. We have students in programs that range from early childhood to mobile diesel who can currently take business courses because they know that what they want to do is open up their own shop. Okay. And they want to have the tools to do that, not just the tactical skills within the industry.
Okay, seeing no further questions, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Nobody else is signed up. Okay, is the department willing to come forward for a few questions? Thank you.
Thank you.
Welcome back. All right.
Thank you. Thank you for having me. Chrissy Vanderhook, Bureau of Career Development Administrator for the Department of Education.
Thank you. Representative Dana.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you for coming back up. I'm just interested to hear from your department and your part of education in New Hampshire perspective on, I believe Shannon's good word was bridge between CTE and CCSNH and any unintended consequences that we should be aware of in looking at the legislation.
Certainly. Thank you for your question. I will say that CCSNH is a recipient of Perkins funding for career and technical education. And so there is already a relationship there because they do have career and technical education programs and on their campuses. And so there is already an existing relationship. I don't see any unintended consequences, I think, pertinent to what you're asking about. Mm-hmm.
Representative Luna.
Thanks very much. Thanks for coming up to take a couple questions. So with respect to the added language in section 2, so this is the bold language. It follows a sentence that says, in instances in current law, a sentence that says, in instances where it is educationally, economically feasible to do so, the commissioner may designate individual career and technical education programs, and here's the operative part, in other than the career and technical education centers. So I guess with that already in place in current law, why is the new language in bold necessary?
It would seem to just further clarify the point, but as Senator Waters put this together, I don't know the intention of adding that particular sentence, but I think to your point, it is effectively in the law that other locations can be designated as career and technical education programs.
Right. So follow up. So I mean, I'm totally on board with the task force and exploring cosmetology, and expanding that into White Mountains Community College, White Mountain Community College. Let me make sure I get that right. Right? Nope. It is White Mountains, plural. I knew it was one way or
all
the
the
other.
mountains.
What's that?
All the mountains are
That's
included.
right. That's right. So I totally support that in section 1. But in your opinion, would this bill be operative if section 2 was scrapped? We'd still be able to accomplish the goals that it wants to achieve?
It is my understanding that would actually, yes, it would be operative without adding the additional sentence. Okay. There is nothing precluding that within the law as stated.
Okay, great. Thank you very much.
And I read it, it may include, right? Yeah. So And I think it's probably there just to focus the point and encourage that kind of joint programming that's in the second half of the sentence.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. But it's pretty clear in the first section that it's also talking about establishing a CTE program to be located at White Mountain Community College. Without that emphasis in section 2.
Right.
I think the bill carries that. I think the question really comes off of what Representative Damon was asking. Anytime we're adding words, even if it's just a few words, sometimes it could create something that wasn't really intended, didn't really come up at the hearing. And if it's not really necessary, why do it?
Certainly.
It's just more work for, OLS and everybody else too. And it makes our nice brand new law books, out of date even faster.
So we can hold that for work session. Yes, Representative Burton.
Just a comment. Sometimes this language helps with accreditors and people reviewing the program to see that the state supports it. That's all. I remember pulling out the authorizing legislation to convince the revisiting team that the state really put it behind the program. That's one reason why it might be good.
All right. Very good. Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay. No further people wishing to testify. I'm going to close the hearing on SB 531. And that brings us to our fourth and last bill for the morning, and that's SB 580. And I see we have our prime sponsor, Senator Sullivan. Welcome.
Thank you for having me. I know we are all logistically challenged at this the situation we have here. So
Thanks for coming over to our side of town temporarily.
Good morning. For the record, I'm Senator Victoria Sullivan. I represent Manchester's South End, wards 5 through 9, and the lovely town of Litchfield. And I bring before you Senate Bill 580. And Senate Bill 580 does a couple of things. First of all, we have the cooperative purchasing program. And what this does, it allows little towns like Litchfield to have the same bargaining and purchasing power as a city like Manchester. So this is a bonus for the taxpayers. They can save a little bit of money on the supplies and the things that they need for their school departments. I know I got an email questioning, don't SAUs do this? Not all schools are cooperative SAUs. They're standalone. So to give them the ability to come together and have stronger purchasing power. And the other things that it does, it puts in rules for local school boards. This I worked with the Department of Education, and the last thing that it does it creates a receivership. We're seeing right now what's happening with Claremont. Some of us have been working. God bless you. Some of us have been working on the situation that's been unfolding in Claremont, and this allows the State Board of Education to actually bring a district into receivership and guide them through the process, which I think when a town or a district comes to the state looking for help, we owe that to the taxpayers to say that we're going to oversee the process. And again, I worked with the Department of Education for the language for that part of the bill as well. And in normal times, these would probably be 3 bills. But again, logistically, we've had to make some accommodations this year. And I'm happy to take any questions.
Okay, we've got 3 topics to explore. Representative Fellows.
Thank you. Thank you for taking my question. So the version of this bill that I have has a fiscal note that was revised on 3/27/26, which was just a couple of days ago. I'm wondering if you've seen that amendment. I don't know if it's different. Maybe it's the same or mostly the same as the original one. So my biggest question actually is related to the fact that the note says, and I know it's correct because I remember this particular program has been the procurement option for towns and school districts has been available for at least 50 years.
Thank you very much. So, in speaking with smaller towns and districts, they did not have that opportunity to do that. So they wanted to be able to come to the state level for procurement. You're right, it's happening with SAUs that are unified, but not with individual towns.
Just to clarify, the program that's been in place for 50 years applied for, was applicable to all the subdivisions, which included towns and school districts. And it's been like that for 50 years at least.
I thank you for your question. In doing my research in this and looking through the laws, that it wasn't applicable to all of the towns. So that's, if it had been, OLS would have kicked it back to me and said, this is already happening.
All right, Representative Pluno.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair. And thank you very much, Senator Sullivan.
Thank you.
So I was wondering if we could talk about Section 5 of the bill, and particularly the first part, which talks about receivership of schools and SAUs. And it says here, without limitation, that the State Board of Education may place into a receivership any school or SAU for the purposes of, and then it goes on and has a list of various things: changes in staffing, closing a school, improvement plans, implementation. But it doesn't set any conditions or limits under what would trip the Board of Education to place a school or an SAU into receivership. So I guess my question is, are there intended limits for this to occur, or is this completely at the discretion of the State Board of Education?
The State Board of Education, thank you for the question, should be able to step in when they see that there's a problem. It would be best if schools could come to them and say, like, we think we're going off the rails here and we need some guidance, before it gets to a point that we're seeing in Claremont, where it is such a messy situation where the kids didn't know if they were going to have sports. The whole school was they had to fire people that were involved in that process. They were still, when we had over the summer a meeting about Claremont and proposed legislation, they were still uncovering problems that were happening that they still were not aware of the scope of the situation there. It would be best if the Board of Education could step in earlier. So no, I don't see that it's a problem that they can step in when they see that there's a need.
Follow-up? So thank you, Mr. Chair, for the follow-up. Thank you for taking my question. So given the fact that the State Board of Education is a politically appointed board, no question about that, and let's say the State Board of Education had a problem with a certain superintendent, or they didn't like, and I'm just going to pick on somebody, the superintendent of the Manchester School District, could they then step in under this clause and make unilateral changes to staffing at the Manchester School District just to just in a political nature, and not one that's manifest in any particular financial situation like what you've described up in Claremont?
Thank you. I believe that the State Board of Education is generally a bipartisan board, and it's never been weaponized in that way. I do know that charter schools have gone to the state board when parents have been concerned with things that were happening there and brought it straight to them. So it didn't have to escalate to a point where there was, it was a huge issue. Things could get corrected fairly quickly. So they already are used to sort of having guardrails on some of our education systems, like charter schools, and this is just an extension of that. They're there to help and guide. I don't believe that they've ever been weaponized against any district, to my knowledge.
So the question wasn't whether or not the state board would be weaponized. The question was, given the language being offered here, could the state board unilaterally step in anywhere that they want and make personnel changes?
Thank you. Again, the State Board of Education is generally a bipartisan board, and I just have more faith in them maybe than you do, but there's nothing in here that says that they can just, but you're making it, you're alluding to the fact that they wouldn't have to have any reason, any cause to be able to step in.
That's exactly what I'm saying, because there's no cause that's required in the proposed language here. Is that my understanding?
I don't foresee a situation where they would choose to step in without cause. As I said, generally people go to the State Board of Education if they have an issue, and then they would be able to step in and help with that situation, help guide schools back on track. Like I said, with Claremont, we waited until it was a very bad situation for the children. And we all heard that, there was a possibility they wouldn't have sports, they wouldn't have extracurriculars. They had to let go of teachers. When we started delving into it, there were layers and layers and layers of problems there. It got to a point where it was an untenable situation. And hopefully, if the state board can step in a little bit sooner, then it's going to be more stability for students that find themselves with those districts in those positions.
Representative Damon.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you for taking my question. So I'm following up on Representative Luno's discussion, and I should note for the record, I represent Claremont, and I have been very present and involved in their crisis and solutions. And I never miss an opportunity to commend the staff of the Claremont School District for how hard they are working on behalf of the kids there. So my question is, would you entertain some language for this that defines circumstances, conditions, and perhaps limits on the role of the State Board of Education if receivership were possible? And sort of corollary to that, there's no statement here of how long a school or SAU would be under receivership. We've had other legislation brought forward similar to this that has had much more specific circumstances described. So what are your thoughts on spelling it out more?
Thank you for the question, Representative. So on line 23, it says the State Board of Education may place into receivership any school or school administrative unit for the purpose of intervening. So generally intervening is something has happened that's been brought to their attention. They're not just stepping in for no reason. But then it does go on to say that they will be placed in receivership pursuant to paragraph 1. The administration body of said school shall develop a turnaround plan for the school or SAU in cooperation with the State Board of Education. So right in there, it states that there will be a turnaround plan. That turnaround plan would have dates, it would have goals, it would have objectives in it. Without those things, it wouldn't be a plan. It would be suggestions maybe, but if there's a written turnaround plan, that's going to have those things in there.
Follow-up.
Thank you. Thank you for taking my follow-up. So I don't think in line 24, when it says for the purposes of intervening, with no statement about what situations merit the State Board of Education intervening, I don't think that's a very clear statute. And similarly, I would certainly agree that a turnaround plan, would have specifics in it, but there is nothing in the proposed language here that tells us what we would expect in those turnaround plans. I guess this isn't actually a question. I'm
Yeah,
sorry.
I think it's not. Representative Wells.
Thank you. So I'm looking at those same lines that it starts at line 23. And can you explain to me exactly what the receivership means and technically in terms of what are they doing? And how is that related to intervening?
Yeah, thank you. So in other states, but this is already the way that they would handle situations like this. Massachusetts has receiverships, but in our charter schools, we already allow the State Board of Education to step in when there's a situation with a charter school. They help get it back on track. The Board of Education makes rules for us all of the time. So it would be under, the same pretense that they've been doing for years. It's just that now it would extend to the public schools, the traditional public schools as well.
So in statute, does that say that those charter schools are under receivership?
I'm not sure, thank you for the question. I'm not sure if they use the term receivership, but I have myself been part of that process with a charter school. So I know that we can, submit a letter of concern to the State Board of Education. They then step in, they go meet with the charter school and say, hey, we want to see what's going on here. And then they do an investigation, they devise a plan to help them get back on track. And it would be the same thing, it would just extend to traditional schools in addition to the public charter schools.
Representative Luna.
Thanks very much. And that was I think a very good question there too, because I think the charter schools are actually chartered, unless they're a charter conversion school where zero exists, chartered under the State Board of Education, as opposed to public schools, which are independent political subdivisions. So I was wondering if you could clarify how the fact that the State Board has the ability to I suppose manage schools that are chartered by the State Board versus the intent of this new language for the State Board to intervene unilaterally in schools that are managed through a different board and are part of a political subdivision, independent political
Yeah,
subdivision.
thank you for the question. And again, we're looking at Claremont where every level of local control failed. It failed the kids, the school board failed, the leadership failed. So then what do? They came to us, they came to the state legislature and said, now you have to bail us out. Well, how far can we take that? We need people they asked for money from the state to help them. And we need to have some kind of guardrails that would work with that district and say, okay, you came to the state for help. Okay, we're going to help you with that, but this is what you have to do to get back on track. This is the responsibility that you have to the taxpayers of this state. And we do give state funds to these schools. So as a state, we do have responsibility for that.
I think we understand that there's opportunity to amend this if you think there's something that needs to be tightened. Do you have, no, you don't.
Thank you.
Okay, Representative McGuire.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you, Senator, for taking my question. I wanted to ask you about the purchasing program in the first section of the bill. Is this modeled after some other part of the RSA's? Maybe there's such a program between towns and the Department of Administrative Services or something like that?
Yes.
Where did this come from?
Thank you for the question. Yes. So on the state level, towns can come together, but just school districts, individual schools don't. So this allows them to have the same bargaining power that their town already has.
Okay. Could I follow up? Do you happen to know what that RSA is?
I don't.
I could probably find it. All right. Thank you very much.
I apologize that I do not.
Representative Bricky.
Thank you. Thank you for taking my question. So in reading the fiscal note, it talks about the fact that the state could be on the hook for quite a bit more money by following this procurement plan. Do you have any idea, I mean, given the state of the state right now and the state of revenue right now, do you have any idea where those funds would come from?
It's indeterminable, so if they don't know, with all due respect.
So really, excuse me, follow up?
Yes,
So-
go ahead.
so-
Just
So you believe that it is okay to put forward legislation like this that could cost the state quite a bit of money and not worry about where the funds come from?
Thank you for the question. Nope, that is not what I said. But they already do have procurement. They already do have people employed in those positions. This would extend that. And I believe that they have it indeterminable because they don't know if it's going to cost more man hours. It could cost 0 more man hours because they already have the staff there. So if the department couldn't come up with a number for a fiscal note, which is their job and duty to put together a fiscal note. Thank you.
Representative Ames.
In the bill, there are essentially three bills, as I understand it. And specifically pointing towards the Section 5 bill, sub-bill. My question is, can you tell us about the predicate bill that this came from? And specifically, was there in that bill any standard or criteria that would apply to the judgment that the state board would be making to go forward with a receivership for a particular school district?
I'm sorry, could you rephrase the question? I'm not sure I followed you.
Oh, sorry. And I'll start again. The question is, in the prior bill, that was not this bill, because there are three bills here. Was there originally a bill that was exactly the same as this, or was there something more in it that spelled out the circumstances, the criteria, the standard that would be applied by the school board in determining whether to go forward with a receivership action involving a particular school district?
Thank you for the question. No, this is the bill.
This is the bill?
Yeah.
Okay, thank you.
And again, if I could, it calls for intervention. Intervention implies that there's a reason for them to step in. I don't foresee the State Board of Education just jumping into any school district to take over when there's no issue there.
Representative Damon.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you for taking another question. So if I'm understanding this correctly, and again on Section 5, the State Board of Education members would be the people going into school districts to do this intervention? Is that correct?
No.
Who's doing it? Sorry, follow up. Who is doing it?
If you read on it, they appointed a receiver. Line 34.
Yeah. So what are the qualifications of the receiver, of the person or entity that is?
And if I could speak to the way that it is currently done with charter schools, for an example, the State Board of Education, the Department of Education would send in someone to investigate, like a lawyer or somebody to investigate what's happening there. And it would depend on the circumstances who they would decide would be best suited to look at the situation.
So what are the circumstances? They're not indicated here.
Again, thank you. If there's a need for an intervention, those will be stated to the State Board of Education. It says very clearly need for intervention.
Okay. Senator, thank you very much.
Thank you very much for your time. I
introducing the bill.
appreciate it.
We have two additional witnesses. First, I'm going to call Linda Tanner, former representative for Sunapee in Springfield.
Honorable Linda.
The Honorable Linda Tanner.
Thank you. It's nice to see some familiar faces. I'm Linda Tanner. I live in Sunapee, New Hampshire. I am currently on the Sunapee School Board, but I am representing myself. And I was a teacher at Kearsarge for 35 years. This bill seems really, when I looked at the title of it, common sense. And I think school districts probably would love to have the opportunity to sometimes make purchases in collaboration. But the real kicker, the real poison pill in this bill is the receivership and the State Board of Education taking over. I too was interested in Claremont because Claremont is very close to Sunapee, although being physically close, it's thousands of miles away financially. And Newport is also a town close by. Both those school districts suffer, and they suffer tremendously because they have a low taxable base, and the state does not provide adequate funding for their schools. Okay, period. That's the bottom line. I strongly object to any kind of receivership, particularly the way it's outlined in this bill. I know Senator Sullivan talked about how the state Board of Education takes over charter schools when they're having difficulty. Charter schools are a whole different animal. They're nonprofits. Once they get their charter from the State Board of Education, they're not really controlled by a lot of the regulations and everything that public schools are. They're a nonprofit. And therefore, when they get into financial problems, a receivership, or it really isn't a receivership because they have a special person at the State Board of Education for charter schools that goes in and helps them with their finances. Public schools, and I'm sure you are well aware of this, and being on a school board, I'm more than well aware of it, is taxpayer money that's 70% of the school budget is raised locally. And if there's a receivership coming in, that takes all the ability of local control out of it. And in other instances, we'll talk about, the state trying to oversee what local people are trying to do. Public schools are probably one of the areas where people really value their local control. They really value that local control because it's their money right out of their pocket. They know the state doesn't give them that much. And so to take that away and give it to a State Board of Education, which, as Representative Luno correctly pointed out, is not elected, it's appointed and becomes very political. And the State Board of Education on a regular basis doesn't deal with individual school budgets. So how are they going to get a receivership, appoint somebody probably from the board to oversee? It's just going to be a disaster. My last comment is that when Claremont had the problems they had, and it wasn't something that just happened, it was over years and years of different superintendents, of lack of funding, and several other issues. When it happened, I remember reading into the Valley News and thinking, why isn't the State Department of Education offering, not requiring, but offering to, or even the state of New Hampshire offering to send people who are professionals in areas of budgeting or professional in areas of organization, and to come as consultants to Claremont in their efforts. And they did, as Representative Damon pointed out, they've been doing a tremendous job in trying to set a plan, get back on track, get more transparent, trying to get things in order. Why didn't the state do that voluntarily? Why is it this receivership? And what is underlying this is what I call the poison pill, is that when we know that there's an underlying motive within politics to really attack public education, why then wouldn't they do a receivership on a district they didn't particularly care for, or a district that was a cooperative like Kearsarge or Fall Mountain that they want to break apart and they can't get it any other way, or that they want to put a cap on the budget, local budget, which is so unpopular with local people. You don't realize, I think, as a legislature, because I sat in your seat, how unpopular many of the things that are going on in the state right now are with the local people, particularly when you try to go in and take over local control, and particularly when you're attacking community institutions like libraries and public schools. So just couldn't stand sitting here and listening to this and not putting in my 2 cents. So I'm willing to answer any questions that you might have.
Okay, thank you very much.
You're welcome.
And Brian Hawkins for NEA New Hampshire. Good morning, last moment of it.
Good morning. It's always great to be right before lunch. For the record, Brian Hawkins, representing NEA New Hampshire, and I didn't hear all of the prime sponsor testimony. I was over at the State Library and then the State House, so raced over here. But I think Representative Tanner captured a lot of what I was going to say. We're concerned principally with Section 5 of the bill. We think that this is a very broad set of reasons with which the state board is given guidance whether they can place a school district or a school into receivership. And then it's unclear what exactly the role of the appointed receiver would be, as well as the process or the qualifications that the chair of the state board would be required to follow, other than not having a financial interest or affiliation with the school. I think the last thing we would want to do in some of the examples that we've been talking about this session is to trade one poorly performing administration for another, because we're not helping that school district with the qualified individuals that they need to right a financial ship that is so critical to do for our students. So with that, I'll close my testimony and hopefully let you get to your lunch. But I'm happy to take any questions.
Any questions? Representative Luno.
Thanks very much, and thank you very much, Mr. Hawkins, for your testimony. And I think, where you talk about the responsibilities of the receiver, which are not clearly defined in here, certainly raises a lot of questions too. And I guess when you take a look at this, is it clear who would have once a district is placed into receivership by the state board and there's a receiver, who has financial responsibility for operating that district? Is that laid out in here?
It's not laid out. I don't believe there's an appropriation in here. I know the state board doesn't really have its own budget. And so I'm not sure, if those kinds of if resources are necessary for any kind of a plan. I'm not sure where that would get those from.
Okay, and a follow-up on that. So if it weren't to come from the state board, the money to operate the district come from the state, if it weren't coming from the state board, it would, I guess, probably then be coming from local property taxpayers. And would then it be a receiver that has no accountability to local property taxpayers, either directly or through their local, elected board, the same way a superintendent is? Would that receiver then be playing around with local property tax dollars?
I think that's another concern, again, when you look at the reasons with which they would be inserting themselves into the development or monitoring of, these are pretty broad. This covers just about everything. And so I'm not sure, I would be concerned with that if I was a local property taxpayer, yes.
Great, thank you.
Very good. Seeing no further questions, thank you very much.
Appreciate your time. Thanks.
Likewise, enjoy your lunch. Okay, that's the end of our business for the morning. I'm going to close the hearing on HB 580, SB 580. And is there anything we want to talk about before we adjourn about what our calendar is for the coming week or two? I know we have one additional bill that's been sent to us.
Mr. Chairman? Yeah, so.
Pass the chairmanship back over to Representative Ladd.
Okay. Mr. Vice Chair. I just wanted to point out, I looked up all four of these bills. None of them are early bills, right? So they're not going to a second committee.
That's correct.
So our due date is May 7th, so there's relatively large amount of time.
And I do believe all bills have been assigned, 181 Senate bills, so this is our full roster of 5. We have these 4 and plus 1.
So, sorry I missed it today. I was over with Senate Ed all morning long, and it was a challenge. Is there anything else for the docket? We will not be, I'll set up the date where we're going to be acting on these bills that we have. If we have the one more bill that just recently must have come in,
We will set that up probably on the same day we may exec some bills. We are not going to be doing anything next week. So you can plan on, taking a break on that. Anything from the committee? Yes, Representative Damon.
Mr. Chair, if it's possible for us to not meet at the same time as Senate Education.
That'd be wonderful.
Really, I'm sure I'm preaching to the choir.
Brian and I were both sitting over there this morning waiting for all the bills, come up that we were going to speak on. So I concur on that. And unfortunately, I really don't think there are because, even for example, like Senator Waters that came in a little late today, he was downstairs, not in an education bill, in another bill. So to coordinate this, especially in
The afternoon, because they're usually morning.
I think you're asking for, we're getting pretty close to the end of things right now. So I don't think it's something we're going to have to worry about. We just hope that we can get back in the LOB and get ourselves back to somewhat a default or a normal stage here. So if there's nothing else, yes, Jen.
To make sure that you know that the extra bill, SB 586, is an early bill.
I see. I haven't looked at it. I didn't.
So that one is due out April 16th.
What's the title of that bill, Jen? Do you know?
Oh, I'd have to go back.
586. So
3 more Tuesdays before the 6th.
yeah, but we still have some time there because the 16th is several weeks into April, and that's tomorrow.
Mr. Chair, it's requiring school districts to publish a school administrative unit audit report after the end of the fiscal year. That's the title of SB 586. Audit report to be published after the end of the fiscal year.
The school district publishes, according to what you did say. Okay. Well, I'd like to know what we're talking about funding there. Okay, so that's where we are. So if something comes up, I'll definitely be letting everybody know. But seeing that we still have several weeks, and next week, next week I'd have to be doing that scheduling by tomorrow noon. Is anybody objecting to meeting next week?
The 7th, April 7th, or April 8th?
Well, we have to meet on a Tuesday, seeing that we don't have the room on a Monday. We have this room on Tuesday and Fridays. Oh, yeah, definitely. Definitely.
I said 3, but we have maybe 2 more Tuesdays from the 7th.
Yeah, we may have to use that Tuesday.
Right.
Mr. Chair.
What would we be doing? Just the one bill, or would you be combining?
Some of those bills, which are later bills, we won't be doing.
No, I'm talking about we've got the 4 that we just had today.
Yeah.
I think you're talking about a hearing on the early bill, 586.
Yeah.
And would we be doing anything else with respect to maybe the 4 bills that we heard today?
I think I'd have to look at it because I wasn't here for the discussion, so I didn't hear what transpired. I know the latter bill she dealt with here, there are a lot of issues. This bill, I got to this committee, it was initially sent to Ed Policy, and I had it vacated to our policy committee here because there's a lot wrapped up in this thing. And it's an opportunity too. Yeah. Especially when I was looking at the other day, at BOSSI, I don't know if you know what BOSSIs are, Board of Cooperative Education, where you're having one school district or one board, like they're doing in Vermont right now, taking care of special education services. And I thought there might be some opportunity in any bill that we have here to try to be a little creative and use it if we have to. Now, we also have, it came out of the Legislative Oversight Committee, we had a bill come up dealing with curriculum frameworks, which we may want to, in calling those academic standards and trying to get that somewhat. That can be added on as a non-germane bill amendment, but would take a hearing and then but we had the time seeing those are bills which are coming up, later on. So we have time. We're still in session here. Yeah.
May I make a suggestion?
Yeah.
Having heard all that, since this fifth bill is an early bill and we have only 2 more Tuesdays, why don't we plan to have that hearing next Tuesday and have a work session on the other 4? Whether we get to executive session is a judgment call, but at least we can air whatever the thoughts are from this morning on those 4 bills at the same time. I wouldn't want to drive all the way in just to have the hearing and to skip over the other bills, even though they're on a more relaxed calendar. We can get, move along.
Oh, we could have a work session tied in there too. And so what I will do is I'm going to talk with Representative Luno and Representative Spilsbury here after this meeting, and I have some things I want to go over with them that I have not had a chance to do yet. And with this one bill, apparently we're going to have that out. So we're going to have to meet somewhere along the way here to get 586 taken care of. But then we may be able to use, rather than having to act on something, we may be able to work on something. And my Lord, there's a lot to be working on here. Worked all day yesterday on some of this. Okay, so we'll count on Tuesday. I don't have a time yet, whether it be morning or afternoon. I want to look at calendar and see what else is going on. Because we're looking also the same day that Senate Ed meets. And I don't want to get caught up in that again, like I did today, over there all morning long. So, okay, so what we will do is we're going to adjourn right now. And I'll get back with people here in terms of when we are meeting at what time on Tuesday. And I'll meet with a few people here and we will look at possibly a work session on one of these bills, or maybe several of them.
Yeah. Sounds like a deal.
Yeah. Thank you. We're adjourned.
We just got copies of SB 586. Hang a second, I realized they did not pull punch them for us, so I'm gonna do that for you.
Well, they didn't the others either.
They didn't the others.
You can give me like anything else. They're not coming from. Yeah.
So this bill. I like this one. Have one that you're trying to get those. Okay, that's academic person handle that's what's getting us for this one. Personnel have and then that would be that's something for oh yeah, but we want to some of the issues we have in here.